All right. Well, let's bring on our guest number two. He is, you know him from TV, you know him from the internet, you know him from League Pass. It's Matt Steinmetz. That is Chris Henson, who is his other picture, by the way, if you can't pick that up.
What's up?
Hey, hey. Hey, Matt. I just
What's
want to
up,
start
Josh?
off with you interviewed Mark Jackson recently, and he made some comments about not overworking himself as a coach and not being one of those live in the film room guys. What do you make of those comments? Do you think people are overreacting and perhaps judging them?
Well, first of all, I don't want to start this. He actually said more than I just popped in there yesterday.
Hmm.
Over the next 3 days, we're going to be, running the entire transcript, and it was like a 40-minute thing. He actually talked more about that later on, basically saying that I asked him if because he just said that people could say that it could come back and bite him, and that people would say, maybe it's not that important to him or he's not spending enough time. And he basically said, people are going to write what they're going to write. And he basically said, they're trying to say I'm going to be a 20% coach, 20% father, 20% pastor, 20% husband. But the fact is, I do everything 100% every time I do it, and I don't cheat any one of those things. So um, I thought it was a little bit refreshing because he took a poke at some of these coaches who supposedly are, get into the office at 6 a.m. and sleep at the facility or whatever. He termed that fake hustle, which I kind of liked because you only hear that
Hmm.
term referred to when it comes to a player. And he told us that he said he's told his staff, don't be coming into the office at 6 a.m. because that's fake hustle. There's not that much to do right now. And he said, look, be prepared, have fun, and then be ready. That's the way he said it. So I think that, yeah, though, I think people are going to, yeah, they'll take a shot at that for sure.
Do you
But I
think
think it's
that
a good,
coaches?
I think it was actually a breath of fresh air because
Yeah.
every coach out there wants to be known as a ridiculously hard worker, and some of them aren't.
Uh, well, do you think that coaches perhaps overcoach that even if they are being the ridiculous hard worker that they portray themselves as, that perhaps at a certain point you're not even helping your team win and you should just be relying on what your players do instinctually? Do you think that happens?
Yes, he Jackson was also asked like what his sideline demeanor he thinks it's going to be, and he got into what he thought he's going to try to be calm and professional. Um, he referenced Phil Jackson, but he said he thought Phil Jackson went a little overboard in terms of relaxing. But he did give the old line that you prepare these guys in practice, and then come the games, you let them play. And he said that a couple times. At some point you got to let players play. So he says the kinds of things that go both ways and kind of cover himself. I find him a pretty interesting guy, to tell you the truth. And here's something that I know you'll like, Ethan. Apparently, he hasn't used a profanity in over 20 years.
Oh yeah, that's
Um,
my kind of coach.
and he made an interesting point, and he said, if I never, he basically said, I will never yell at a guy in front of people, humiliate him. I'll never swear at him. I don't cuss people out. And he maintains that if you don't do those things to a player, it's very hard for them then to kind of buck the system or challenge a coach in a public situation because he's never done that to any player, assuming he doesn't
Hmm.
do it. So he's got some interesting he's got some interesting takes. He's pretty bold. He said, for example, he said, I know the norm is for coaches to say how hard they work, but what you're going to find is I'm not the norm. And he's like really proud of that. And so, there's going to be a lot of these. I think there's going to be a lot of these things, or periodically things are going to come up that Mark Jackson says that are going to raise eyebrows because he's not necessarily totally conventional.
Yeah, he really comes out with some bold statements, and I'm a Mark Jackson agnostic, to use that sort of religious term. Until I'm going to wait for him to actually coach. But what I'm wondering is, it seems that Lacob perhaps did not know that Adelman was available, and I think that took a lot of people by surprise when Adelman was hired. Do you think that if you were running the team, would you have wanted to go after Adelman as opposed to Jackson, going back in time and making that decision?
No, I don't. I don't like Rick Adelman for. I don't like Rick Adelman for this team. I think Rick does his best jobs with more mature teams. I mean, you look at the Sacramento and Portland teams. Particularly Portland, but even Sacramento, those guys all had, Stojakovic, Weber, Doug Christie, Bibby, they had a few years under him. This team needs a heavier hand than Rick Adelman. Rick Adelman's the kind of guy who he allows his players, he treats his players like adults. He doesn't try to motivate them. He doesn't beg them to come early to practice or to stay late. He assumes that a professional player, will take care of that on his own. And his Portland teams did that with Terry Porter and Clyde Drexler and Kersey, and even later with Cliff Robinson and guys like that. Those guys were pros. The Warriors need to learn how to become professionals. And I don't think Rick Adelman is in that business. Rick Adelman is into coaching players who already are professionals.
It's always a great thing to learn about your team when they need to learn how to become professionals. But it does seem like you're quite positive on Mark Jackson, a very sunny disposition.
No.
Well, it seems like you're positive. It seems like no. Continue. Sorry.
Okay. You say you're a Mark Jackson agnostic. I say I'm open-minded to Mark Jackson. I don't know if he's going to succeed or fail. There's some things that I like and some things that the thing that worries me about Mark Jackson is how assured he is, actually. That's what worries me most, and his complete conviction that he's going to be able to turn this around. It's not that I don't believe he can't do it. It's just that, having been around this team for 16, 18, 20 years, a lot of guys have made that claim and nobody's been able to pull it off. By the same token, I do think he's got a little something that's hard to put your finger on that is different than just about everybody who's come down the pike. And the fact of the matter is, even though we don't know how the new ownership's going to play out, he's got a different backing, if you will, behind him. So that could change the dynamic in a positive way for him. So I'm open-minded to Mark Jackson, absolutely. But I don't think they're going to make the playoffs next season. I don't see how that happens.